Hello, my lovely rose garden, and welcome to an unfortunate review, a word which here means full of descriptions of horrible things happening to good characters. I am Avalon Roselin, indie author, and I am issuing you a warning to turn off this video now. I'm sure there are far happier and more lighthearted recommendations in the Suggested Videos tab. In fact, there are happier videos on this very channel. Your time would surely be better spent viewing one of them instead of listening to the tragic tale that I am about to recount. I'll give you some time to click away. You're still here? Well, don't say you weren't warned. A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket was one of my favorite series as a kid. We had the first 5 books, and I reread them endlessly. Snicket's writing style, the dark drama that the main characters were involved in, the constant threat of Count Olaf looming over them no matter how they tried to escape him, the presence of the narrator who seemed to be using this true crime investigation of the Baudelaires to escape his own unfortunate circumstances. It was just good. And despite the wide swing in tone toward comedy, I also enjoyed both the film starring Jim Carrey as Count Olaf that adapted the first 3 books, and the Netflix series with Neil Patrick Harris in the same role. Count Olaf is in an acting troupe, so I personally consider these casting options perfect for a more comedic take on the story. Hell, I would say that A Series of Unfortunate Events may be a primary contributor to my own dark sense of humor. At the same time, Count Olaf may be one of the most frightening villains in all of children's literature. His determination to acquire the Baudelaire fortune by any means necessary, even when some of the attempts are campy, is downright horrifying. I don't think anyone came away unchanged from reading the first book, wherein he tries to forcibly marry Violet, and rereading it as an adult clearly expects her to fulfill her wifely duties to him. Ick. Speaking of the first book, let's get to the plot. A Series of Unfortunate Events follows the unfortunate lives of the 3 Baudelaire orphans, oldest daughter Violet, middle son Klaus, and youngest daughter Sunny. Each of these super-autism siblings are precociously brilliant in one way or another. Violet is an inventor, Klaus can remember anything he's ever read, and Sunny, the literal infant, is the muscle of the group due to her enjoyment of biting things. On the flip side of the cast is Count Olaf and his troupe of actors who dog the siblings every step in an attempt to get their hands on their fortune. Olaf becomes their legal guardian following the fire that killed their parents and intends to leverage that to get their fortune, but when it doesn't work, he resorts to other means. Throughout the series, the trio are pawned off on increasingly distant relatives who make up the supplementary cast of each book, until they finally run away altogether due to being wanted for crimes they did not commit. Of course, there are 13 volumes in this series to represent the unlucky number 13. They are, in order, The Bad Beginning, The Reptile Room, The Wide Window, The Miserable Mill, The Austere Academy, The Ersatz Elevator, The Vile Village, The Hostile Hospital, The Carnivorous Carnival, The Slippery Slope, The Grim Grotto, The Penultimate Peril, and The End. And to say that these books are zany is putting it lightly. The Baudelaires inhabit an almost Wonderland-esque world where the randomest things are taken for granted, especially by the entirely useless adults surrounding them. There is a real sense that the kids are on their own to solve their problems, as just about every single time they try to get outside help, the adults either don't believe them, are compliant to harmful systems, or have their hands tied by those same systems. The fact that very rarely are concrete references to time and place made throughout the series also lends to that Wonderland-like disorientation for the reader. A lot of the clothing and aesthetic visual choices lead one to think it's the late 1800s or early 1900s, only for Snicket to casually throw the existence of computers at you. The Netflix adaptation really runs with this particular quirk. I read the first 8 volumes of the series as a kid, pretty shortly after they were published. When the publishing slowed down in 2002, I also stopped reading them, mostly because, as stated, we only had the first 5, my library only had up to 8, and in 2003 I picked up a new series to hyperfixate on in Warrior Cats, so yeah, I didn't read the final books in the series until just recently for this review, but I had heard a lot of mixed things about its ending. Talking about this series is going to involve spoilers, so before I get into that, I will at least state that my favorite book in the series as a child was The Miserable Mill. Brainwashing and mind control have always been tropes that fascinate me, and I also thought that The Miserable Mill had some of the best comedy in the series, with the freaks working at the mill having incredibly mild differences from the typical person, such as being left-handed. If you are leaving the review here, please be sure to leave a comment telling me what your favorite version of the series is. The books, the Jim Carrey movie, or the Netflix series. They're all so very different, but also enjoyable. I don't know if I'd be able to say that any of them are better than the others, since they're clearly trying to accomplish different things with their storytelling and focusing on different aspects. I must also say that while I adore the writing style in general, and the inclusion of some high-level vocabulary that is made accessible to kids through repetition, Snicket is right to warn the reader from binging the series. The series' iconic style can lean toward annoying if you read too much too fast, or at least it was for me. One at a time with breaks in between, though, that experience of reading the books is an utter delight. If you are leaving the video now, please remember to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. I make videos about the books I read and the books I write, and your support really makes a difference for an indie author like me. If you're interested in supporting me even further, please consider buying my books or becoming a patron. You can find the links to my website, Patreon, Ko-fi, and social media accounts in the description. Alright, it's time. Let's talk about the end, what it means for the series as a whole, and answer the question, did the ending ruin a series of unfortunate events? Finales in series are tricky things. They can flavor the reader's view of the entire work, and it's hard to write an ending that will satisfy everyone. There are always going to be things that people, many times including the author, wish would have happened differently after all is said and done, and that's what makes writing the ending of a series so hard. As long as a series is still moving, you can't be disappointed in how it ended because there's still a chance for whatever it is you're waiting for to happen. As someone struggling to pen the final installment of the main story in my own series, I can definitely relate to what a daunting task this must have been for Snicket. That said, I took some time to ruminate on the ending of a series of unfortunate events. I parsed through other people's opinions on the series. I looked at reviews that both praised the ending and expressed disappointment. Most of them leaned toward the disappointment side of the spectrum, though some charitably said that it didn't affect the quality of the rest of the series and they could live with the ending. I definitely understand the criticism of the ending. It certainly isn't the grand sweeping conclusion that I'd imagined the series having as a kid. In fact, it isn't much of a conclusion at all. The story doesn't so much end as stops, with questions left unanswered and the Baudelaires once again facing an uncertain future. And initially, this was where my reaction to the finale was going to stop as well. However, I decided to hold off on recording this video right away until I'd had some more time to think about the ending and what it means for the series. What is the final, ultimate message that Snicket is trying to convey with this story? What does it all mean? Obviously, this is heavily based on my own interpretation, but I think that the ending makes perfect sense after considering that life itself is a series of unfortunate events, and the end pretty much perfectly shows this as the conclusion of the Baudelaire story. Fleeing the Hôtel Dénouement by the sea, the Baudelaire siblings find themselves stuck in literally the same boat as Count Olaf, who tries to boss them around and treat them as his new henchpeople, but by this point the Baudelaires are less afraid of him and more tired of him. He is still dangerous, and they never lose sight of that fact, but there's not a lot he can do to them at the present moment to cause too huge of a concern, since no harm he inflicts on them will get him closer to their fortune in the middle of the ocean. A storm washes them up on an island where they are taken in by the small, very restrictive community led by a man named Ishmael. For once, the Baudelaires are immediately believed about Olaf. His worst attempt at a disguise ever does not work, and the Baudelaires have the option to live in safety. But that safety comes at the cost of everything they are. The whole island very much reads as an allegory for the lotus eaters in the Odyssey, with the coconut cordial the people drink keeping them, well, cordial. Good old Snicket wordplay. The Baudelaire Three would also have to turn their back on their pregnant friend Kit Snicket, who is currently stranded on a part of the island that is about to flood and unable to move herself. Ishmael's attempt to keep the island people free from the treachery of the outside world ultimately fails. The population of castaways have been hiding things and keeping secrets all along, and a mutiny is soon on the rise. In the resulting conflict, Ishmael shoots Count Olaf with the Count's own harpoon gun, releasing deadly spores and mortally wounding Count Olaf. The Baudelaires realize that their parents, having lived on the island years ago, actually infused the apple tree with the cure for the fungus, but as it is dangerous to newborns and fetuses, they're unable to use it to save Kit Snicket's life as she goes into labor. Thus, just as the Baudelaires received the news that they were now orphans on the shores of Briny Beach, Kit Snicket's daughter is also orphaned on a beach. The cycle comes full circle as the Baudelaires, once orphans placed into guardianship, find themselves the guardians of an orphan. They name her Beatrice after their deceased mother, the very Beatrice whom Lemony Snicket has been speaking about all through the series, who rejected his proposal and married the Baudelaire's father instead. The Baudelaires spend a year on the island, the rest of the castaways having left due to not trusting their cure and probably dead at sea, until they ultimately decide it's time to set out and rejoin the world. True, the world will be dangerous. There will be villains. Unfortunate things will happen. But that's part of living. They cannot keep Beatrice confined to the island her whole life to keep her safe from these things, just like Ishmael could not isolate his community from all danger. Eventually, bad things will happen, and it is better to be prepared to face these things than bury your head in the sand to avoid them. This is the final lesson the series teaches, and in my opinion, it's a good one. There are no happy endings in life. Not because you can never be happy, but because life is a series of ups and downs. Eventually, unfortunate things will happen. The question then is, do you cave to your darker impulses and become treacherous in turn? Or do you tie up your hair and invent a solution out of the parts you've got? Something else I want to highlight about the end is how, despite taking place on a small island, it does kind of open up the world a bit. Twice an adult character starts describing events in their lives that sound eerily close to the things the Baudelaires have experienced, thus fooling them and the reader into thinking they're about to get answers, only for said character to reveal that, for the most part, they were talking about completely different people, places, and events. It shows that there is actually more going on in this world, completely unrelated to the Baudelaires, and that other people are also experiencing misfortunes. I think one of the moments that really stood out to me was Count Olaf not necessarily excusing himself or claiming that he's not a bad person, but instead saying he isn't any worse than other people, that in his situation, anyone would do what he did. Even the Baudelaires are not perfect. Their actions have caused misfortune to befall others, whether that was their intention or not, and of course the older generation of characters in the VFD have their own histories as well. In the grand scheme of things, the Baudelaire orphans' circumstances are rather more like collateral damage to the drama going on with the VFD schism, which leads nicely into Snicket's other writings. Will I ever read those other writings? It's possible. I admit that I'm not so much a fan of secret society type stories, and it would be a lot to keep track of, which I struggle with nowadays, to the point that I didn't even really feel confident talking about it in this review. But for Snicket's writing style alone, I think they'd be worth checking out. And that is it for this unfortunate video. What are your opinions on the series of unfortunate events? Do you prefer the Jim Carrey film or the Neil Patrick Harris series? Please leave an eye emoji with all your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe while you're there. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thank you to my patrons. If you'd like to see your name here or in the description below, please consider joining my Patreon. Your support means so much to me and allows me to continue making content. If you want to support my content in different ways, consider buying my books, donating on Ko-fi, subscribing to the channel, or even just giving this video a like and comment. Any and everything is appreciated so much. Keep growing till next time, Rose Garden!